Hi everybody, it's Abra from Miss Z Photography again, and I'm here to go over the third part and final part of the exposure triangle. And the exposure triangle are the three different components, hence a triangle, that work together to get you the perfect exposure on your images, on your DSLR camera. So the first video is the ISO or ISO, and that's how much light falls on your camera's sensor. The second video was on your shutter speed, which is how fast or how slow your shutter opens and closes on your lens. And now we're going to talk about the aperture, which again has to do with your lens. So it's how wide or how narrow or small your shutter opens and closes on your lens. So the wider it opens up is a lower, what's known as f-stop. So if you're at f2.8, you're going to have your shutter is going to be open pretty wide. So it's going to be letting in a lot of light. However, not as much is going to be in focus. So it's good if you only have one or two subjects at the most in focus, next to each other, or you're standing really far back with your subjects close together. The higher the number, the smaller the opening, so it's darker photo. Less light is falling into your camera through the lens, but more is in focus. So you would use a higher number if you were photographing a lot of people. Or if you were doing real estate photography, you don't want some of the photo in focus, some of the room in focus, and some of it blurry. If you were doing, depending on your landscape, you'd most likely want most of your landscape to all be in focus. So you would do a higher f-stop number. F-stop, aperture, and depth of field are all interchangeable, and on your cameras, on a Nikon, it's the A when you turn the dial, and on Canon, it's on AV, and that's aperture priority, where you're controlling the aperture only. When you're in manual, you're controlling everything, so you're controlling the ISO, the shutter speed or exposure time, or the f-stop, aperture, depth of field. So there's really little depth of field when you're in a really high f-stop because everything is in focus. However, the lower the number, less is in focus, so there's more depth of field. So it's really great for doing a few people who are close together and they're in focus, but then the background around them is blurry, because that gives some depth to the image and some interest to the image. So the lower the number of f-stop, the lower the f-stop number, the wider that the lens, the wider that the shutter inside the lens will open. And because it's opening wider, it's letting in more light. So it is a lighter photo and a brighter photo, but less is in focus and more is blurry. And the higher the f-stop number, the smaller the opening is. Your shutter in your lens opens smaller. So it's allowing a lot less light to come into the camera, which is making for a darker photo. However, more is in focus. So the aperture is a little harder concept to get. So you kind of need to keep kind of going over that and saying, okay, so the lower the f-stop number, even though it's wider and letting more light in, less is in focus. And the higher the number, the smaller the opening is going to be. So it's going to be a darker photo, but more is going to be in focus. So I hope that helps. Again, manual is putting all three of those principles together and trying to get all of the pros and none of the cons. So again, it's more, there's a lot of factors that go into it, whether you're indoors, you're outdoors, what time of day it is, what the weather is like, how many people are there, how far your subjects are from the background, how far you are to the subjects. So there is a lot to go over, but these videos explain the main principles of how each part of the exposure triangle works. So just for a quick review, the ISO or ISO is how much light falls on your camera's sensor. So the higher the number, the more light is going to fall on your camera's sensor, making a brighter, lighter photo. But the con is that there will be more noise, artifacts, or grain. The lower the ISO number, the less light will fall on your camera's sensor. And so it'll be a darker photo, but it'll be a sharper, crisper photo. The shutter speed has to do with your lens and how fast or how slow your lens opens and closes. The higher the number, the faster it opens and closes, so the less light it lets in. So therefore it's a darker photo. However, you're stopping motion and there's little to no blur. The slower you go, the more light is being allowed in, so it's a lighter, brighter photo, but it's also allowing for blur and motion. And then what we just talked about, the final part of the exposure triangle, is the f-stop, the aperture, or the depth of field, however you want to refer to it as, but it is referred to in increments of f-stops. So the higher the f-stop, so you're at f22, your lens shutter in your lens is going to only be opened a tiny bit, so it's going to be a really dark photo, but you can have 25 people in that image and their faces will be in focus, but it will be a darker photo. The lower the f-stop number, so if you're dealing with f2.8, you're going to have your shutter inside your lens is going to open up a lot wider, so it'll be a much brighter photo, but a lot less is going to be in focus. So most of the background will be out of focus, and if you take it with too many people and if they're not in the same plane, you'll have some people in focus and some out of focus. So, and that might be what you want too. You might want to have just like one or two people that are the focus and then have a bunch of people in the crowd that are blurred out. So all these not only depend on you try to utilizing the pros of all of it and not getting any of the cons, but it also depends on what your final outcome is, what you want, what you desire for your final outcome. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me at info, INFO, at MissZphotography.com. That's MISSZ photography, all one word, .com. You can also find me on social media. I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/Miss MISSZ photo. And that's all one word. I'm also on Instagram at instagram.com/Miss Z photo. So please follow us. Reach out to me. If you like any of my photos, I love comments. So again, this is Abra from Miss Z Photography. I hope you found these videos helpful, and I will be making more in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye now.